Zara Ebrahimzadeh was stabbed to death by her estranged husband.
Yes, he is a victim himself.
Then I'll kill you all.
I'll burn the house down and kill you all inside.
In the heart of Adelaide, Australia, a tragedy unfolded that shocked the nation. This is the story of Zara Ebrahimzadeh, a mother of three who was brutally murdered by her estranged husband, Ziola, in front of 300 people at a Persian New Year celebration. This was the final act of control in a long history of domestic abuse that Zara had suffered at the hands of her husband. On the night of March 21st, 2010, the Adelaide Convention Center was alive with the joyous celebration of the Persian New Year. The air was filled with laughter and music as around 300 people gathered to partake in the festivities. However, this lively atmosphere was about to be shattered by a horrifying act of violence that would leave the attendees in a state of shock and disbelief. Zara, a 44-year-old mother of three, was at the celebration with her children. She had recently escaped from her abusive husband, Ziola, and was in the midst of filing for divorce. Despite the fear and trauma she had endured, Zara was determined to maintain a sense of normalcy for her children. Unbeknownst to her, her estranged husband had also decided to attend the event. Ziola, a 57-year-old man who was a respected figure in the community, and people knew him as a gentleman, as his son Armin pointed out. However, behind closed doors, he was a different person. Zara and Ziola had a tumultuous relationship, marked by Ziola's controlling and abusive behavior. The couple had three children, Armin, Atina, and Anita. Armin and Atina, in particular, bore witness to their father's violent tendencies. Armin recounted instances where his father would physically punish his mother and sisters for perceived disobedience. He was a controlling and abusive husband and father who would resort to physical violence to assert his dominance over his family. His son Armin recounted how Ziola would slap, punch, and whip his mother and sisters if they disobeyed his rules. His eldest daughter Atina also shared chilling accounts of her father's violent behavior, including being whipped with a belt for an hour and being smothered with a pillow. As the celebration was in full swing, Ziola had made his way through the crowds toward Zara. In a shocking act of violence, he stabbed Zara multiple times in front of their horrified children and the stunned crowd. The fact that Ziola chose to commit this heinous act in such a public setting was his twisted way of reclaiming his honor. He believed that by making such a bold statement, he would regain the respect he felt he had lost. The Adelaide Convention Center, filled with hundreds of witnesses, became the stage for his final act of control over Zara. The presence of Zara's children at the scene added a heartbreaking dimension to the incident. The trauma and shock they experienced as they watched their mother being brutally attacked was unimaginable. The immediate aftermath of the stabbing was a scene of chaos and confusion. The joyous celebration turned into a nightmare as people screamed and scattered, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Atina, who witnessed the murder, described her father's demeanor as calm, showing no shame or anger. She recalled screaming, "You killed her," and holding onto his jacket to ensure he was caught. But Ziola showed no signs of resistance or attempts to escape. Meanwhile, Zara was fighting for her life. Paramedics rushed to the scene and quickly transported her to the hospital, but it was too late. Zara Ebrahimzadeh, a beloved mother and a brave woman who had dared to escape an abusive marriage, succumbed to her injuries. The festive night turned into a nightmare. A community was left in shock, and the three children were left to grapple with the loss of their mother. The brutal murder of Zara Ebrahimzadeh, in front of hundreds of witnesses, sent shockwaves through the community and law enforcement agencies. The South Australia Police were faced with a case that was shocking in its brutality and public nature. The investigation was led by a team of dedicated officers who were determined to bring Zara's killer to justice. Given the public nature of the crime and the number of witnesses, Ziola was quickly identified as the perpetrator. He was arrested and charged with murder. However, the investigators knew that this was just the beginning. They needed to build a strong case against Ziola one that would stand up in court and ensure that he was held accountable for his actions. The investigators began gathering evidence from the crime scene. They collected the murder weapon, a knife, which Ziola had discarded at the scene. They also interviewed the numerous witnesses who had been present at the event. The witnesses provided crucial testimony, recounting the horrifying events of the night. They described Ziola's sudden and violent attack on Zara, painting a chilling picture of the incident. The investigators also delved into Ziola's background. They discovered a history of domestic violence, with Zara and her children having endured years of physical and emotional abuse at his hands. Zara had taken out a restraining order against Ziola, a fact that further implicated him in the crime. The investigators also learned about Ziola's controlling and abusive nature, his refusal to accept Zara's decision to leave him, and his threats against her life. One of the key pieces of evidence in the investigation was a letter that Zara had written to the police months before her murder. In the letter, Zara had detailed the she and her children had suffered and expressed fear for her life. The letter was a heartbreaking plea for help, a testament to Zara's fear and desperation. It was also a damning piece of evidence against Ziola, demonstrating his capacity for violence and his intent to harm Zara. The investigators also looked into the actions of the police in the months leading up to Zara's murder. They found that Zara had reached out to the police multiple times, reporting Ziola's threats and violations of the restraining order. However, despite multiple warnings and pleas for help, the police failed to take necessary action against Ziola. This oversight, a glaring lapse in their duty to protect, directly led to the tragic and irreversible consequences that followed. Had they intervened more decisively earlier on, the outcome might have been different. This aspect of the investigation led to a separate inquiry into the police's handling of the case. The investigation into Zara's murder was a complex and challenging process. It involved piecing together a multitude of evidence, from the physical evidence at the crime scene to the testimonies of witnesses and the history of domestic violence. The investigators worked tirelessly, driven by their commitment to justice for Zara and her children. Their efforts resulted in a strong case against Ziola, one that would ultimately lead to his conviction. The resolution of this harrowing tale came on the 8th of July, 2014, when Justice John Sulan delivered his verdict. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence as he began to speak. Ziola Abrahimzadeh, he declared, was guilty of the murder of Zara Abrahimzadeh. The words echoed in the courtroom, a final confirmation of the truth that many had already accepted. Justice Sulan did not mince words in his sentencing remarks. He described Ziola's act as a final act of control, a final act of revenge against Zara. He condemned Ziola's lack of remorse and his attempts to blame Zara for his actions. He also acknowledged the failure of the system in protecting Zara, stating that her death was a tragic case that highlighted the insidious and destructive effect of domestic violence. Ziola was sentenced to a non-parole period of 26 years, a sentence that reflected the severity of his crime. The sentence was met with a sense of relief by Zara's family and the community. It was a measure of justice, a small comfort in the face of such a devastating loss. Zara's life was cut short, but her legacy lives on. The abuse Zara and her children faced was not a sudden occurrence. It had been a dark cloud over their lives for years. The family had tried to escape Zia's clutches, seeking refuge and a new life away from his violent outbursts. However, Zia's obsession with control and his perceived loss of honor drove him to track them down. The culmination of this prolonged period of torment was the tragic event at the Adelaide Convention Center, where, in a fit of rage and a desperate need to reassert his control, Zia took Zara's life in public. Her story has become a rallying cry in the fight against domestic violence, a stark reminder of the urgent need for change. It has led to significant reforms in the way domestic violent cases are handled in South Australia, and has sparked a broader conversation about the issue across the country.